Throughout history, several tanks have been developed with designs that stand out for their unconventional and attractive features. These vehicles often prioritize experimental functionality over aesthetics, resulting in awkward, bulky, and sometimes bizarre shapes. Here's a list of some of the weirdest and ugliest tank designs ever conceived. If you're aware of any tank designs that are considered unattractive, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. The TOG-1. This was a prototype British super heavy tank produced in the early part of the Second World War. Its enormous flat hull and disproportionately long shape made it look more like a rolling fortress than a sleek combat vehicle. The small turret placed on top of the long chassis looked out of proportion with the rest of the vehicle. Its angular, unrefined shape lacked the smooth contours typical of more modern tanks. The Type 3 Kachi. This was an amphibious medium tank developed by the Imperial Japanese Navy in World War II. The tank's flat, boxy shape lacked the sleek lines typical of more advanced tank designs. The turret, though mounted on a rotating base, was relatively small in comparison to the rest of the vehicle, creating an unbalanced look. The wide tracks, designed for amphibious operations, appeared mismatched with the tank's bulky frame, adding to its awkward silhouette. The tank's thin armor and exposed crew compartments gave it a less refined, utilitarian appearance. Bob Semple tank. This was a light tank designed by Bob Semple, the New Zealand Minister of Works during World War II. It is often considered weird and ugly due to its makeshift, improvised design. Built from a tractor chassis, it features a bulky, unrefined hull that looked more like a farming machine than a military vehicle. The tank had an exposed superstructure with minimal armor, giving it a top-heavy and unbalanced appearance. The Bob Semple tank was more about function in the emergency than about any form of streamlined design. Sturmpanzerwagen A7V. This was a heavy tank introduced by Germany in 1918. The vehicle's large, exposed superstructure made it appear top-heavy and unbalanced. Its relatively narrow tracks compared to the size of the hull gave it a disproportional, unstable look. The turret was small and under-refined, further adding to the tank's awkward appearance. The A7V's armor, while functional, gave it a primitive, industrial aesthetic rather than a sleek military vehicle. Its large crew compartment was exposed with minimal protection, contributing to its unattractive and unfinished design. The Marder III. This was the name for a series of World War II German tank destroyers built on a modified Czech Panzer 38T chassis. The vehicle's hull was low, flat, and boxy, giving it a crude, unpolished look. The open-top fighting compartment with a large gun mounted on it made the Marder appear top-heavy and unbalanced. Its exposed crew area and minimal armor added to its rough and unrefined aesthetic. The lack of protection for the crew further detracted from its visual appeal. Ultimately, the Marder III's design was more about having significant firepower than making it look sleek or attractive. The Landkreuzer P1000 Ratte. This was a design for a 1,000-ton tank to be used by Germany during World War II. Its enormous size, with a length of nearly 36 meters, made it look more like a fortress than a tank, with a heavy, industrial appearance. The oversized turret and massive gun appeared out of place on such a bulky chassis, giving the vehicle an awkward, heavy top look. The Ratte was a design focused on sheer firepower and armor, ignoring aesthetics for functionality. Stridsvagn 103. This is a Swedish Cold War-era main battle tank, designed and manufactured in Sweden. The fixed forward-facing gun in the driver's position at the rear gave it an unbalanced and awkward silhouette. Its angular, low-profile hull, while functional, appeared excessively flat and unrefined. The absence of a rotating turret made it look more like a heavy armored tractor than a modern combat tank. The Stridsvagn 103 prioritized practically over aesthetics, focusing on defensive and offensive capabilities. This led to its odd and unattractive visual style, which set it apart from more traditional tank designs. Kolohousenka. This was a series of Czechoslovakian wheeled and tracked light tanks designed in 1923. The vehicle's large, awkward shape with an excessively tall turret made it look more like a mobile fortress than a tank. Its wide, bulky tracks were disproportionate to the hull, giving it a top-heavy, unbalanced appearance. The vehicle's lack of streamlining and rugged industrial look further contributed to its unattractiveness. Its clunky design focused more on heavy firepower than mobility or aesthetics. The Kolohousenka's appearance was more utilitarian and experimental than conventionally attractive. The Fiat 2000. The Fiat 2000, Italy's heaviest tank of World War I, had an odd, boxy design with riveted armor, giving it a bulky, clumsy appearance. Its high turret and awkward proportions made it look top-heavy and unbalanced. The narrow tracks and wide hull also added to its ungainly look. It was one of the largest designs of its time. The driver was seated at the front with very good overall vision. The layout of the Fiat 2000 differed to the other tanks then in use, especially the British ones. The engine was separated from the crew, not placed behind the compartment as modern tanks, but below it. Object 279 tank. This was a Soviet experimental heavy tank developed at the end of 1959. It has an unconventional design that often appears strange. Its rounded, almost egg-shaped hull deviates from the typical angular tank silhouettes. The inclusion of 4 tracks rather than the unusual 2 aimed to reduce ground pressure for better terrain traversal. This, however, made the tank look bulky and disproportionate. The high ground clearance was another feature that contributed to its odd appearance. As a result, the Object 279 is often considered both weird and attractive. Chrysler TV-8. This was a tank design project by Chrysler in the 1950s. The tank was intended to be a medium tank capable of land and amphibious warfare. The design was never produced. Its design was flawed due to its overly complex and impractical structure. The large, pot-shaped turret with an outer shell created an awkward, bulky appearance. Its floating capability, while innovative, made the tank less maneuverable and practical for ground combat. The separation of fuel tanks from the crew added another layer of complexity without significantly improving functionality. Disston tractor tank, also called a 6-ton tractor tank, was an American light tank of the mid-1930s. Its design is often considered weird and ugly due to its unconventional makeshift appearance. The tractor's boxy, unrefined structure made it look more like a piece of industrial machinery than a military vehicle. Its oversized tracks, while functional, gave it a bulky and awkward silhouette. The exposed engine and crude armor added to its clunky, unpolished look. Unlike streamlined, purpose-built tanks, the Disston seemed like a hastily improvised solution. Ultimately, the Disston tractor tank was a failed experiment in tank development. The Ford 3-ton tank. This was one of the first tank designs by the US. The Ford 3-ton tank was odd and unattractive due to its simplistic structure with no turret, making it look more like a tractor than a combat vehicle. Its machine guns were mounted directly on the front hull, giving it a flat, uninspiring appearance. The exposed suspension and narrow, ungainly tracks made it seem fragile and underpowered. Its tiny size, designed to accommodate only 2 crew members, further emphasized its awkward, toy-like proportions. The lack of armor plating and the open driver's compartment made it look incomplete and impractical for battlefield use. Marmon-Herrington CTLS. The Marmon-Herrington Combat Tank Light Series were a series of American light tankates that were produced for the export market at the start of the Second World War. This tank had a peculiar, unattractive design due to its small, asymmetrical turret mounted off-center on the chassis, giving it an unbalanced look. Its high, boxy hull with riveted armor made it appear more like an improvised armored vehicle than a purpose-built tank. The narrow exposed tracks and awkwardly high profile reduced its visual appeal and practicality. They were originally designed to be amphibious light tanks. The M3 Lee Grant, officially medium tank M3, was an American medium tank used during World War II. The M3 Lee Grant was considered ugly due to its awkward, asymmetrical design. Driven by technological limitations, the primary 75mm gun was mounted in a fixed hull sponson, giving the tank a bulky, unbalanced appearance and preventing effective use from hull-down positions. A secondary, smaller 37mm gun sat in a disproportionately small turret on top of the already tall hull, making the tank look top-heavy and clumsy. The tank's height and boxy profile made it more noticeable and vulnerable on the battlefield. And with this, we're signing off for today. But don't forget to stay tuned as we bring you more interesting videos from the world of military. We'll see you guys in our next video. Till then, bye-bye.